November 14th, 1944. Camp Riverside, Kentucky. 58 German women stood in the mess hall line, their hollow faces bearing the exhaustion of months retreating across France. Captured 3 weeks earlier, near the Belgian border. These women's auxiliary corps members had served as radio operators, nurses, and clerks for the crumbling Wehrmacht. Now they waited for what they assumed would be meager prison rations. 23-year-old Emma Schneider stood third in line, hands trembling as she clutched her metal tray. The former radio operator from Munich had lost nearly 30 pounds during her final months of service. Her gray uniform hung loosely on her frame. She'd eaten nothing but watery turnip soup and black bread for 4 months. Behind her, 27-year-old Rosa Klein whispered to 21-year-old Marie Fisher, guessing what Americans would serve. Potato peelings, maybe some grain mush. Certainly nothing substantial. They'd been taught that America itself suffered food shortages, that capitalism was collapsing under war production's weight. The line moved forward. Emma found herself before Corporal Daniel Peterson, a broad-shouldered farm boy from Wisconsin who managed the camp kitchen. He wore a genuine smile as he placed a thick slice of meatloaf on her tray, its surface glazed and glistening. Beside it, he added generous mashed potatoes, creating a crater he filled with rich brown gravy. Green beans glistening with butter completed the plate. Emma stared, unable to move. This was more food than her entire family had eaten in a week. This was Sunday dinner. Behind her, 19-year-old Sophie Weber spoke what they were all thinking, but it's Tuesday. Why are they giving us Sunday dinner on Tuesday? The confusion rippled through the line like a wave. Several women began crying softly. Others stood frozen, staring at their trays as if the food might disappear. For months, these women had known only hunger. Emma remembered standing in ration lines in Munich, clutching precious stamps that meant the difference between survival and starvation. Her younger sister had fainted twice from malnutrition. Their mother had given up her portions so the girls could work. Rosa's experience as a nurse had been worse. She'd watched hospital patients die not from injuries, but from simple starvation. Children arrived with swollen bellies and stick-thin limbs. She'd held a 7-year-old boy's hand as he died because his body had nothing left to fight with. The women had been taught that Americans were suffering equally, that enemy prisoners were treated brutally. Now Emma stood in a Kentucky mess hall with more food than she'd seen in months. Every belief she held about America was crumbling. When they'd arrived at Camp Riverside, they'd expected the worst: beatings, starvation, slave labor. Instead, Captain Sarah Mitchell, a Boston career officer, had welcomed them with unexpected dignity. The barracks were clean with real beds and blankets. There were washing facilities with running water. What none of them anticipated was Corporal Peterson's philosophy about food. The young man had grown up on a farm where meals were abundant and hospitality sacred. When assigned to manage the camp kitchen, he'd made a decision. He would feed German prisoners exactly the same food served to American soldiers. Not because regulations required it, but because his conscience demanded it. The mess hall fell silent as 58 women sat at long tables, staring at their plates with disbelief mixed with fear. By the 3rd week, most women had begun writing letters home through the International Red Cross. Emma sat on her bunk one evening, trying to compose something honest without being cruel. How could she describe eating 3 full meals daily while her family starved? "Dear Catherine," she wrote to her sister, "I am safe and well. The Americans treat us according to the Geneva Convention." It was bland, revealing nothing. She crumpled the paper and started again, writing words she'd never send. "This morning I ate scrambled eggs and bacon. Yesterday we had pot roast. I feel like a traitor every time I eat." Around the barracks, other women struggled similarly. Charlotte Miller wrote pages describing the camp's kindness, then burned them in the stove. Only Sophie actually sent letters home, carefully editing every word to remove mentions of food beyond adequate rations. The 4th week brought mandatory newsreels that Captain Mitchell framed as language instruction. What they actually saw was footage of American life that contradicted everything they'd been taught. Grocery stores with shelves stocked full. Families sitting down to elaborate meals. children drinking milk and eating fresh fruit. Emma watched in stunned silence as an American housewife shopped for her family's weekly groceries, casually selecting items from overflowing displays without ration cards, without careful calculations. The ease was shocking. "This is propaganda," Marie whispered in German, but 31-year-old Anna Werner shook her head slowly. "Look at the details. This is real." The women had been eating American food for 3 weeks. But seeing ordinary families taking such plenty for granted made reality undeniable in a new way. May 1970. Emma Schneider-Fischer stood in her Frankfurt kitchen, teaching her teenage daughter how to make American-style meatloaf. The recipe was written on a yellowed card in her own handwriting, copied from memory of watching Corporal Peterson prepare it 25 years earlier. Her daughter, Lisa, born in 1952, had heard versions of her mother's story throughout childhood, but never fully understood. Now, as Emma mixed ground beef with breadcrumbs, eggs, and spices, she tried once more to explain. "When I was captured in 1944, I believed Americans were cruel enemies who would torture prisoners. Everything I believed was wrong." She shaped the mixture into a pan. "The first meal they gave us was meatloaf like this. It was Tuesday evening, but the food was so abundant we thought it must be Sunday." Lisa watched her mother work, seeing the distant look that always appeared when she spoke of those days. "But you came home. You could have stayed in America like some of the others." Emma nodded, sliding the meatloaf into the oven. 14 of us asked to stay. I chose to return to find my family, to help rebuild. It was the hardest decision of my life." She'd found Munich in ruins. Her family's apartment damaged, but standing. Her mother had survived, weakened by years of deprivation. Her sister Catherine had married a British soldier and moved to England. What Corporal Peterson taught me with his meatloaf was this: abundance is not evil. Kindness to enemies is not weakness. And the measure of a civilization is not its military power, but how it treats those who have no power to resist. The timer rang. Emma removed the meatloaf, its surface glazed and glistening exactly as she remembered. She'd been making this recipe for 25 years, serving it to her family as a reminder of where she'd been and what she'd learned.